Thank you for joining EcoDirect Solar and Storage Today podcast and training. Today we are going to talk about different battery chemistries, and we've got John Weber with Outback Power, regional sales of the Western Hemisphere of the U.S. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Renee. I always appreciate doing these things with you and spending time with EcoDirect. Before we get started, just want to make sure everyone knows that these opinions are my own and they don't necessarily reflect Outback Power or Enersys, but I'm super excited to be here and talk a little bit about storage and where it all applies in this new renewable world.
Awesome. Me too. You've been working in the solar industry for 10 years, a little bit longer?
Yeah, I think we're right at 10 years now. Yeah.
Okay.
And I
Well,
think you and I started almost the same period, didn't we?
yeah, we did. So it was pretty neck and neck when we both entered the industry, and really, you were the one that taught me really about battery-based systems. Here's how to size the breakers for your battery-based inverter. Here's how you take a look at the different types of batteries and the chemistries, and it was absolutely fundamental for me to be able to grow. And now, 10 years later, CEO and partner of EcoDirect, and still the focus is on batteries, chemistry, storage, everything ESS. So once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm
Yeah.
really excited because I think that there's a lot of good information out there on different battery storage systems, but there's a lot of misinformation too. So by hosting this battery training, I'm hoping that we can help people make the right purchase for their application.
Yeah, it helped going back. It helped that you were a quick study and you were quick to learn our equipment along the way. Because back in the day, our stuff was a lot more complicated. And with today's options in lithium, lead acid, AGM, flooded, there's just a lot of different options that are out there right now. And I think there's some confusion about where to find the best application, especially when we start thinking about what people are. The hot topic button is, I want a lithium system, or I want, I want a certain name brand system or
Have you
whatever.
heard of flow right?
No.
This is an interesting one because it's 100% recyclable, and it's a saline type of battery, similar to what we saw for like the Aqueon
Oh,
batteries.
yes. Yeah.
Do you remember those?
I do
So,
remember those guys.
and they for us, and I think for many, uh, they just didn't always quite fit the bill, but they really did have their place. And if you had a really slow discharge, so your loads were consistent but pretty small, then you could have that type of battery chemistry for your storage system, and it would work great, and it would last a super long time, and they were 100% recyclable. And so we're seeing some of that kind of older technology be redone in some ways, and become more efficient. And so now they're much larger capacity and scale. I don't think that those will be the ones that everyone's going to get for their house, because it would take up the whole
Right.
garage.
Yeah,
But
I've seen a few of those, and the old Aqueon batteries, you had 4 to 6 pallets of those things. And it's like,
mhm.
unless you have a dedicated off-grid shed or something like that for those batteries, their energy density was just very, very low. So their footprint was gigantic compared to, a lead acid or a lithium solution. And I think for most customers these days, how much room is it going to take up in my garage is probably question number two, with question number one is how much money is it going to save me? And then maybe question number three is how is this helping the environment? That's usually the order of how people make their decisions on renewables these days.
That it is. And, when people are considering getting storage, where it's going is one of the biggest questions that we have because it makes a difference. If
Hmm.
you are mounting it outside, you inevitably need to find something that has an outdoor rated enclosure, or you're going to have to build something to house that storage system. Uh, Now, with so many of the batteries being UL 9540A compliant, it's easier to put them in the garage, but depending on the size system that you're looking for, it usually it should fit, I would say, for the most part. But the larger you get, the inevitably the more room you're going to need to put it. And so it's one of the first questions that we ask when we're looking at, which system is going to be the right choice for them. Uh, the other one is really like, how are they going to use it?
Hmm.
And so from like the use case standpoint, and I really think that everyone who's working in the ESS space and sizing and designing these types of systems really needs to focus on the use case and then what the loads are. And those two factors are arguably the most important, because you're able to provide realistic expectations for the customer and you can pick the best solution for their needs. um, I don't know if
And
you see.
yeah, and we've seen a bit of a change over time because back when we both started, the cost per watt on solar was somewhere in the $2.50 range. And so oftentimes when people were trying to decide, what do I do on my home? What do I do for my off-grid living or whatever? I remember recommending, hey, put more batteries in. You're going to have longer generator run times to get them charged up, but panels are really expensive. And now that's everything's kind of flipped on its head. And now that panels are exceptionally cheap, and arguably inverter equipment's getting less expensive as well, the storage side of things has really kind of come up as the number one cost. And as you said, understanding what the customer's loads are, usually the conversation starts off with, I need everything backed up. And then you're like, okay, well, that's a $200,000 system. They go, oh, well, let's start paring that down and really helping people understand the fridge freezer lights and a pump to keep the water out of the basement type thing are really what, let's use the word critical. And that's typically how we describe that backup panel inside the home is what are your critical loads? And let's be honest, critical. Well, I can't have my pool pump not run for 2 days. You can. You're going to have to like run extra chemicals through it, but otherwise, you're going to spend $20,000 on batteries just to run your pool pump and make sure that it always runs. And they're like, oh, yeah. But what I'm excited about is some of the load management systems that they have nowadays, where
Yeah.
based on information coming in from a system, breakers are automatically opening and closing, reducing. So if the sun's shining, power everything. As the sun tapers off in the evening time, it starts shutting some of those loads down. And so you can put a really large PV array onto a home because it's so inexpensive, keep the battery for the lit fridge, freezer lights at night. But then with these new load centers that they have coming out, managing those loads in an intelligent way so that if that 15 kW arrays got full sun, sky's the limit. Run your pool pumps and everything else during then. But if an event occurs where you don't have power, then you have these very critical loads that keeps the Wi-Fi, the internet, computers, and things that the customer has decided are very important to them. And so it's changing how people look at solar and how they look at it as storage.
It is, and they should be, for the most part, those should be all pretty readily available by end of this year. There's a few. Savant is one that I believe is readily available on the market. But other than that, I know that there's a few other ones coming out. And what's cool is that they're going to be able to be uh, manufacturer agnostic. So it
Mm,
doesn't matter like what energy storage system you go with, whether it be like the Panasonic, Generac, Outback, Solarc, whichever system you go with, you can use whichever load panel you want for the
right.
most part. I think Enphase is coming out with one that is going to be like they want to see it used with their system, but it hasn't been released yet. So we'll kind of
Yeah.
see what happens when it
Definitely
is.
supply constraints have resulted in some early excitement and long delays on some of these products.
Yeah, they have, and not to segue too much away from the storage side, but there's with the chip shortages and some of the just raw materials, we're noticing that from a communication standpoint, that's really changing, whether it's Ethernet, Wi-Fi,
Mhm.
and what manufacturers are doing to kind of circumvent that the shortage of materials. And that was just really fascinating to me. It was something that I hadn't thought about, but is integral when you're looking at lithium batteries because they have a battery management system, which
Right?
essentially is a computer chip inside that communicates to the inverter. Uh, John, because you have so much experience, I'm just curious. Open loop, closed loop communication. How important, in your professional opinion, is it that closed loop communication is established between a lithium battery bank and the inverter system that's going to be used?
In theory, when you have that type of communication, you're making your battery management system a lot more interactive with the total solution. And so, what I've seen with the open loop communication, where they're basically, for those that aren't sure what that means, is it acts like a replacement lead acid battery where there's no direct communication to it, whereas closed loop, you're getting that feedback from the system and they're sending command and control. The open loop communication, it ends up resulting in adding extra cost and arguably a little less refinement to the system. Now, there's some great solutions that are out there, and I won't turn anybody down on that. But with closed loop communications, you're able to send from the battery management system to the inverter to that charging source exactly what you need without having to add in some resistors to burn off extra energy while you're balancing your cells and different things like that. So there's some distinct advantages, and one could argue um, a well done system on either end is going to have the same result. But I think that most of the time, if the battery management system is able to talk to the inverter, it's a more refined process and you're going to get a better result out of that than if you didn't have that level of communication.
You
Communication
know,
is always better.
Right. And that's a good point too, because if it is properly designed, if you do have a dump load on the system, which a dump load is really a way for you to bleed off the power. So if your PV array is producing more power than you're using and the battery's already topped off, where does that power go? And if
Hmm.
you don't have communication established, that could become an issue. And so that's kind of hard to tell, like how many people are very well aware of closed loop versus open loop. I might post a like a voting button under this if we can. 'Cause I'd just be curious, like if most people in the industry that are working with these types of systems are like very well aware of that, and if it doesn't have closed loop communication, are they putting in a dump load or a way to make sure that they're not overcharging the battery system? Because that is important. So
Right. And
it's
especially with systems getting as large as they are, um, you potentially have thousands of amps moving around, especially on the DC side of things, when you get into 10 or 15 kW arrays, which, as I mentioned earlier, uh, the prices for panels are getting so low that people are choosing to add a lot more solar capacity to their homes, covering every square inch of their roof that they can, even on, kind of, oh, it's a northerly facing panel. I don't care. Just
yeah.
throw some solar up there. I'll pay for it if you guys are already up on the roof. And so with those large amperages moving around, having that system be able to talk to the array and manage those amps moving around, it is going to be a more refined application than open loop. But at the end of the day, there are some really good companies out there who have spent the energy and time to really make sure that there is no appreciable difference between the two. But for the most part, I'll reiterate that a closed loop communication, having that level of communication is always going to be slightly better than an open loop.
Agreed. And so many of them are established already. Anyways, it's just you generally are paying more for those battery systems.
hmm
So, what do you mean by levelized cost of ownership?
There's a few different ways that people justify the cost of the system. And one of the things that we struggle with Outback Power is we're historically one of the most expensive products in the market. But when you add batteries to a system, regardless grid tie, or if you're doing a generator, that cost of ownership can be calculated a couple different ways. You can figure out what your cost of energy is over time. You can figure out what your levelized cost is um, just on that battery bank. So the next time that you have to replace it, this is what you have to do. So there's some different ways to calculate out what that levelized cost of ownership is. A lot of the time, people will say, or people will ask the question, when does it make sense for me to add batteries to the system? And typically that's where we start calculating in using the battery to offset for time of use or different things like that.
Hmm.
And so it's a pretty simple math equation, which is taking your cost of your battery and dividing it by the number of cycles. And that's going to give you what basically your cost per kilowatt hour is. So if round numbers, if you spend $1,000 on a, a thing that gets you 1,000 cycles, then it's a penny per, or sorry, $1 per cycle to cycle that battery.
For now, I know that we have coming from 10 years ago in battery storage. The majority of the storage systems were lead acid,
hmm
and I think that there is still a place for lead acid batteries. And Outback Power makes some very robust, high capacity batteries. So, like the XLCs,
hmm
those are like the powerhouse. Um, for those specific types of batteries, may even like comment on the XLC, which you could find on ecodirect.com or Outback Power website. Uh, what do you think the best use case is for those? When would you use that over a lithium battery system?
That's a good question. The interesting thing or the neat thing about the 1000 XLCs is that they are almost spot on to any competition out there on the on the lithium side of things, meaning that, 3,500 cycles, which is, 10-year warranty, and a tremendous amount of capacity in a pretty reasonable size footprint. With the 1000 XLCs, a lot of the customers that we see using them are looking at broad temperature ranges that the batteries are going to be in. So they're, I don't know, in the foothills outside of San Diego, where it gets real hot in the summer, it gets real cold in the winter. There's snow up in those mountains, and so we'll see products go up there where they have extreme temperature differences. And we also have customers who, Murphy's Law will rear its head in some really interesting ways. So trying to keep a simple system but a robust system is again where something like an AGM or an XLC 1000 comes in, because it doesn't have a battery management system. It's just buckets of plastic and lead and acid, and it's simple. And anytime you get something complicated, that's where that Murphy's Law idea starts to rear its head. And there's a lot of customers who are concerned about terrorist attacks, solar discharges, EMPs, those types of things. And most power electronics are going to be affected by those types of events. And some customers are saying, with Outback equipment, I can order some replacement boards and keep them in the baggies and set them aside. But if a lithium ion system's battery management system goes out, I'm dead in the water. There's no work around it. And so some customers will actually choose something like the 1000 XLC because they want to be able to rely on that storage system and not have to worry about a battery management system being in the way of getting to that power.
Just out of curiosity, because you're very creative and talented in several different ways, but if a battery management system broke, what do you think that you personally, I'm just curious, do you think you personally could repair it?
I don't know that I could repair it. If it was the end of the world and this is all I've got, I would definitely get out my meter and my screwdriver and start poking around to see if I couldn't find something that was usable inside of there. But again, with a lithium ion system, that battery management system plays a key role in balancing cells and everything else. So if you're able to bypass it and get right down onto the DC bus system of that battery, you may be able to charge it and discharge it. But there's some risk that if you have an imbalanced cell, things could get really exciting a year or 6 months or a few days even without that BMS. So for the most part, BMS systems aren't, that's an extreme case. Like I said, the end of the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's your concern, I would, and not just because I work for the company, I would actually choose an Outback system. I'd order some extra boards, and I would choose a lead acid battery, or even go with like an Edison style battery where you can a nickel iron battery where you can actually own the dry powder contents. Get a still so that you can make pure water, and renew that battery system with those dry contacts, and you can have a generational battery with it. So that would be a very expensive investment and not something that I would necessarily do for myself. But if I had a crystal ball and I knew it was happening, that's where my money would go, would be to make sure that I had power. But I did speak with a customer once, just as a funny side story. He was the most realistic guy about the apocalypse. He basically said, "Oh no, we've got 6 months of everything that we need, and then we're leaving after that because we'll either kill each other, or the conditions will be so bad that we have to move anyway." And so it was just an interesting sort of like, oh yeah, practically we're going to run out of food. We can't grow food in that amount of time. We're going to become, people on the move. And most of the time when I hear people talk about surviving the apocalypse, it's like, yeah, okay, you have 1 or 2 years worth of product in your home to keep you there, fresh water, filters, medicine, everything else. But then what? That's probably a different that's probably a different podcast altogether. How to survive the apocalypse, your renewable options and solutions. Maybe that's our next show.
You know, and we'll probably never see that day. Let's hope.
Oh
But
gosh,
it
yeah.
it is that is true. Because you're right. I mean, even if you're able to sustain yourself in your particular bubble, that's only going to be so long. So I think really the main focus is, making sure that you do have storage for when the utility disruptions occur, because they do occur. They're going to happen more frequently. It's what we've seen over the past couple of years here in California. We see that regularly. They're planned. They say, "Hey, heads up, we're shutting off the power." So if you're on the outskirts and that does happen to you, there are incentives. So SCHIP
Hmm.
is still around, and still providing people with funds to make sure that they can have the incentive to get storage, because it does help the utility as well. And there's just a strong incentive for that. Uh, but really, it's being able to use your batteries on a regular basis,
Right.
like you use your phone. Your phone, you plug it in at night, use it all day, and then you do it again, and that phone just keeps on working for you. And really, a residential or even commercial utility battery system will last significantly longer than your phone will.
Hmm.
So using it for time of use, and really for energy arbitrage is like kind of the keyword we're hearing a lot, because it makes sense and you can calculate your ROI. Uh, if you're, well, you're a homeowner, so you recently did put solar on your home, right?
We're working on it right now. We're in the
Okay.
process of putting we live in a very unique home here in the Phoenix area, and so we don't have any real roof space to put an array on, so we're choosing to do a shade structure instead
That's awesome.
with batteries. Yeah.
Which ones did you end up going with?
For the panels, or
Well,
just,
just for the storage system, but the panels too. So I'd be curious, like you can, what are you
man,
installing?
I don't remember the name of the panel company. It's an interesting name. Yeah, I don't recall it off the top of my head. I'd have to stop and dig for it for a minute. But yeah, so we're likely going to be putting a dual stack Mojave system here from Outback Power on the house. So right now we're getting ready to release the Mojave inverter and lithium ion system, but then we're working towards being able to stack multiples, just like with the Outback FXR inverter, Radians. A lot of customers have more than just 8,000 watts worth of need, especially, time of use and self-consumption, they're going to run those air conditioners that will outpace even an 8,000 watt inverter pretty quick. And so the plan here is we'll add more air conditioning capacity once we add the solar array, because yeah, I'm looking at a $500 a month or more power bill to cool this structure that I live in.
Wow, and I've seen the structure, so the dome, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
hmm
surprised that it actually wouldn't get cooler faster. Like
Well,
$500 seems
a,
a lot.
a ball is the least surface area to volume ratio, right? What they fail to tell you when you own a 40-foot ball is that is a lot of surface area. And so, the original designers of the home used swamp coolers back in the day, and that got pulled out, and now we have traditional air conditioning inside the home. But it's just not quite enough. Our main floor is at 75, and I think I'm probably sitting at 83 degrees upstairs just because, um, it's hot here in Phoenix. I think it's gonna be 108 today. So it's just a lot of surface area. So that's the plan for us is to put in a big array, put in charging stations because we think that EV is going to be part of it. And so just to tell you a little bit about why I chose to do batteries and why I'm choosing to do it with this system and such a large system, because really we're only drawing when the air conditioner is running and everything else is around 6,000 watts. Why am I choosing, such a large array and everything else? Part of it is because of the incentives that we have here in Phoenix. Switching over to time of use is going to be part of that. So it's 7 cents during the one part of the day, and then a lot more than that. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head for the remainder of the day. But it's when the air conditioner is running at its hardest that we would be consuming it. So that 20,000 watt array is really meant to not only cover the air conditioning loads, but allow us to future-proof ourselves. And we're going to actually put in charging stations for EV vehicles at the same time, because we'll be able to offset the charging to the cars and everything else. Because if you listen to what everybody's saying, 15 years from now, you're going to be hard pressed to find actually a gasoline engine.
Yeah.
It's going to get rarer and rarer as more and more car manufacturers take that over. So we're trying to future-proof the house a little bit and make it a bit more appealing when we go to sell the house as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's about just fun fact. It's about 2.5 kW worth of solar that you need for an average drive. So
Hmm.
we based that on 12,000 miles a year, and kind of used 5 peak sun hours as an average.
I
Just
see.
you kind of have to blanket it in that fashion to kind of figure out your size, because it depends on a lot of factors. How often are you charging it up, and how far are you driving? If it's only once a week, then you certainly don't need a system that's probably as large as somebody that's using their electric vehicle to commute to the
Right.
office every day. So it's but that's good to know. And what size is your battery system going to be?
Well, it'll be dual Mojave. So each Mojave's technically it's a 15 kilowatt hour battery for each one of them, and I'll be a dual stack. But really usable is about 12 kilowatt hours. So we'll have 24 kilowatt hours, and that should get us through that time of use period pretty easily, especially with such a large array. Even in the waning hours of the sun, we'll still be producing something to offset that time. And we're fortunate because we also have net metering. So any extra credits that we accumulate during the morning hours, we can kind of buy back from the grid in the late afternoon to charge, whatever EV vehicles we end up with. So let me ask you this: when you talk to customers about, that 2.5 kW you need on your roof plus 5 sun hours for the array, are you assuming that they're getting net metering in there, or how do you? Because if a car's not plugged in while the sun is shining, you're not getting anything. You're offsetting your consumption in your house, but you're not necessarily charging that vehicle. How do you talk about that?
We do. I mean, it requires a longer conversation with the customer. So here, really, we've trained our staff, and uh, we train our installers to have this type of conversation with homeowners,
hmm
that you do have to find out, well, when are you going to be recharging the vehicle? Is it during the day, or do you work all day and that's just not possible? So you have to do it at night. And if you have to do it at night, can you set a timer so it starts charging it at 1 a.m.? And between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., that's when you're actually recharging the vehicle versus coming home from work and just plugging it in and paying
Right.
like the highest price per kilowatt hour. So yeah, it's definitely it does take more time to have those conversations. And for us, I think like personally, I love having those conversations because you're so confident that well, here's the right system for you, like based
Mhm.
on everything that you told me and or told us, and the design analysis, and the discovery for what you're really looking for, and kind of the meat and potatoes, what is driving you to make this 30, 40, $50,000 purchase. Sometimes it can be lower too, of course, but with storage it generally does kick it up by about $10,000 to $20,000 pretty
Right.
easily. That's just, and that's assuming that you're getting it right at the beginning and not doing a retrofit. So it's, but yeah, we ask them about that, and also, we do talk about storage a lot because most homeowners at this point, I would say, are aware that if they do not have storage with their system, if the grid goes down, their system goes down as well.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's become the adoption rate is very high for our customer base. And there's a couple of reasons for that. We specialize in ESS, so energy storage systems, and so we always have marketed that. So I think people really gravitate to our website and contact our sales and design team for that reason. But also, we have a lot of different solutions out there,
Right.
and a lot of it is a lot of these systems are referral based. If you do a really nice job for somebody and they're happy, they tell everybody about it.
Mhm.
They, check out this app. I have it all on my phone. Look at how much money I'm saving, and it becomes, just kind of a buzz for them. So we take a lot of pride in making sure that we're promoting the right system because there are a lot of different options. And one of the one of the things that we're going to be putting out there in the Outback Mojave will be on this list, but we're doing a battery comparison chart. So I've looked, and there really wasn't one out there. We'll tag it underneath this and put a link so everyone who watches this training can access it later. But we're going through and just doing a comparison to what is the maximum discharge current for this battery, and what is the temperature rating. From a warranty standpoint, how many cycles are you getting, and
Mhm.
just comparing Outback Mojave to Simplify to Home Grid to Fortress, Discover. If I left one out, they'll most likely be on the chart
You're
anyways.
right.
But
Yeah.
it's but we're going to we'll send it to you. So hey,
Nice.
this is what we put out for like Outback in the Mojave. Do you agree with our assessment? And then here's the lineup, and we're hopeful by sharing that information, it's going to help everybody. Make sure you're getting the right one, because sometimes lithium isn't the best choice.
Mhm.
Sometimes one system is going to be have a higher capacity or output for your loads than another, and it does make sense to choose one system versus the counterpart. But you need to have ideally somebody that is familiar with all the different technologies so you can make sure that you're getting the right one. Oh,
For within the context of that chart, do you plan on addressing the UL 9540 safety listing? Is that going to be, are you going to only include batteries that have the 9540 listing, or because there's a lot of options out there if you don't include that, but then you may struggle getting it installed in places like California.
that's a great question. I think that primarily it's only going to be UL 9540A because that's primarily what we're offering,
Hmm.
really, like for nothing else. I mean, one of the ones that we get a lot is by Big Battery. they have a pretty wide variety of battery storage options, and to be honest, they look all right. They look fine. It looks like a standard battery. Most cells are coming from overseas, and they're no exception. And uh, but like that particular one we get a lot of calls on because it's a much lower price,
Right.
and so people want to buy those batteries instead of a Fortress Home Grid Simplify option, and it's not, again, I don't think that they're bad batteries, but I think that there are better options that do have, the closed loop communication. Most people, my confidence, and to be honest, I just don't know that everybody is going to put in the right size dump load for their battery system, or understand that if they take a vacation and if the power goes out and they're not there and they don't have a smart panel and they didn't set it up right, you could really cause a lot of damage to your batteries. So we take the more direct approach. We know that it's going to work. We're 100% confident in all the systems when we're doing the sizing and design and recommendation for the products. And for us, that's easier. Maybe down the road, do one
Hmm.
that's like, hey, like, why don't you want to wire 12 volt, rely on batteries in series and connect them to a 48-volt inverter? uh, which, or the Battleborn batteries is another one that, unfortunately, there are homeowners that are like, well, I'm just going to take, 8 to 12 of these and, wire parallel series at the terminal level and, connect it to my inverter. And that's absolutely not what you're supposed to do. So Ecodirect is notorious for kind of myth busting some of these information discrepancies. and
Sure,
uh,
sure.
eh, and it's not even a discrepancy, it's just people think that you can do that and you can't. So it's just it's from an education standpoint, so
Yeah.
we put that out there. And
There's always two reasons to read the manual. One is, well, I guess there's three. One, to understand how it works. Two, to understand really what the warranty is. And then three, what how do I taper my expectations based on the first two bits of information to really understand how that system's going to work? Because you're absolutely right. There's some pretty grave risk. I will say one of the advantages, like what AGM or traditional lead acid batteries have over lithium with BMS systems, is there's some BMS systems that if you over discharge the batteries, you've essentially bricked the BMS, meaning that they don't want to let you have access to it because there's a safety issue and they don't want to let that happen. And so um, we have many customers who, over the years, back in my tech support days and inside sales days, where people accidentally left something on the cabin, left and came back, and they shaved probably a year or more off of their lead acid batteries, but they were able to recover it because they're able to connect that to the Outback charge controller. The charge controller, they got it back up and running, and they recovered. The recovery process for a lithium ion definitely requires a little bit more research, because it's kind of that difference between digital and analog. If you have an old cassette tape and it's been banged around and stuff, you can probably listen to what's on the cassette tape. It might be garbly or whatever, still very analog, or an old record player, still very analog. But in today's digital world, if you drop your phone in the toilet and don't pull it out, it's just done. And so there is some of that risk of how do I recover? So just, yeah, what you're saying is, and I completely agree with, make sure you really understand in those extreme cases, because they do happen even by mistake, what is my recovery process for this advanced storage product?
yeah, we emphasize reading the manual often because it's not something that you can just like talk about, and you miss the little things end up being the big things. And when you miss it and you could have just read it, uh, really it's kind of the fault's on the installer at that point, because the reason that it's in the manual is because it's key information and you have to know what's in there to install and make sure that the design is going to work within your scope. Uh,
Right.
but the good thing is that we've got a lot of seasoned solar vets like ourselves that together and collectively are putting out the right information. Here's
Yeah.
what you want to be aware of. This is what you need to know. And, from battery storage system, just to kind of tie it all together, it's knowing, what are your loads and how do you plan on using the storage system?
Hmm.
If it is for time of use and it's mainly for grid tie only, and you have the batteries in the event of a backup or a utility outage situation, but more or less you're just using them to offset your bill, which is huge because they charge you almost like 3 times the amount per kilowatt hour during those peak times than
Hmm.
they do, just at off peak hours. And where are you going to put it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, is it going in the garage? Is it going in a shed? You do have to plan ahead for it. And um, we have load calculations, and now there's a bunch actually out there. Uh, I think you helped me create the one that we still use. It's kind of complicated. Not complicated, but I mean it has the generator inputs as well as there's a couple things, but it'll take into account your loads, the PV array sizing, the amount of peak sun hours,
Yeah.
the inverter size, battery size, and it's just really it's cool. I like that version because it's old school, and I tend to get all the details. So, like, the more details, the better. Like, I want to
Of
know as
course.
much as possible. But even, if you kind of just want to take an estimate, there's ones online now that are like, I have a microwave and I have a hair dryer, or, I've got 2 fridges and 1 freezer. And it's really easy to just even punch those into whichever like site, whether it be Enphase has one, Solarc has one, I think Simplify has one
Hmm.
on their website. But it's so easy just to figure out like what you actually like to get an idea of what size system you're looking at. So there's no excuses for not doing it.
Right. Yeah, and we have one as well. It's been refined a little bit further where it'll actually make a recommendation on the total system package. So Outback offers not just individual components to build out these big, beautiful systems, but we do have what we call SystemEdge packages. So if you go through the load sizing sheet that's on our website, um, you can actually get a recommended system, or it says give our inside sales team a call. You've just gone into multi-stack systems. But again, that's where EcoDirect, I think you guys are one of the shining stars in the industry, that if somebody needs a large Outback system, you guys have the knowledge. We've spent the time with you guys and getting trained up, and you have 10 years worth of experience of sizing Outback. So
Mhm.
you'll probably do a better job these days than even I would, now that I've gotten away from doing that on a daily basis and more into the sales side of just helping customers on a larger scope of issue. You continue to dig down and deep with customers. So yeah, if I had a recommendation, you're doing a large multi-stack, you could direct a ton of time with Renee and their team, getting them trained up, and yeah, so they can help you out. That's my
Thanks.
endorsement for EcoDirect.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. And it is helpful to have to have that level of knowledge from like just sizing 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Because even like some of the components have changed, the overall sizing of the systems. It gives you the ability to see a broader view
Right.
of what you can do and what you need to consider. But yeah, it's always great working with you. And my apologies. I'm going to go to your website after we get off this and go check out your tool because
Nice.
admittedly, probably I don't think I've seen it in a little while, but I'm going to rest assured see it in about 10 minutes. So,
Yeah. Maybe we can
thank
throw
you.
it down in the description below or something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what we'll do, and I'll definitely share with you the information on the battery comparison chart, like I mentioned earlier too. And again, together is how we move the industry forward. So
Exactly.
I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and ultimately educate our customers across the board on
Yeah.
what their expectations should be. And I hope that everyone finds it helpful, and we'll be doing more of these. So check back and come see us next time.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Renee. Appreciate always spending some time with you, and look forward to hopefully seeing you at SPI this year in Anaheim.
That's right. So
Although I think
yes,
they changed the name of the show. I don't think it's SPI anymore. It's something else. They,
R plus ESS
sure.
or Rest Plus.
Yeah.
But yes, that is. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a great show. They do have a very heavy emphasis on storage specifically. So I think there's just going to be it's going to be a lot of fun, but it's going to be very educational too, and we'll definitely have to meet up there
Yeah.
and reconnect, and maybe we'll do one live from the
There you
show.
go.
That'd be pretty
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. We'll have a booth there. It'll be exciting. We'll be showing the Mojave off there and whatnot. And yeah, just look for the show. It's in mid-September. So love to see you. I think that may be the next time we get to see each other in person.
Yes, it'll come fast, no doubt.
I know.
We're already
Gosh.
in, rolling through the year here, but it's fun. So we'll keep doing it.
Cool.
But thank you again, John, and we'll
Yes.
talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Renee. Appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you. So even like the title A&E, what does that mean? A&E.
Who are you asking?
I guess on the top, well, John, so it says Outback
Oh.
Power, A&E Lithium Renewables.
That's me mistyping a D.
Oh. Okay,
I had
all
to
right.
look. I was like, yeah. So the E and the D are right next to each other. That's what.